Welcome to our video series, Talking to Humanitarian Leaders. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with the Interagency Standing Committee Champion on the Prevention of Sexual Exploitation and Abuse and the Director General of the International Organization for Migration. Mr. Swing was nominated as the IASC Champion for PSEA by the Principals Group in 2011. He is now on his second 5-year terms as Director General of the International Organization for Migration. Welcome, Director General Swing. Director General Swing, you are the champion of the Interagency Standing Committee, PSEA, since 2011. Why did you take up this role? Why is this issue so important to you that you would take on such an important position such as that?
Well, it was a personal, great honor for me to be asked to do this, but I recalled when this was done in December 2011, the principals asked me to do this. I said to them, you know, thank you very much for this honor, but I know that I was selected not because I succeeded, but because I failed on PSEA, didn't I? And of course, no one was discourteous enough to say they agreed with me, but in fact, that was the case. What do I mean? When I was the Special Representative Secretary General in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, heading what was then called the MONUC peacekeeping force, I almost lost my job and the mission because of gross violations of women, children, everything from rape to child molestation, terrible things, I wasn't sure we would survive. It did such damage to the beneficiaries and to our reputation. So we learned some lessons from that. First of all, I learned that I had been asleep at the switch. I hadn't been aware enough of this issue. I hadn't been serious enough with the generals and colonels under me to say to them, this is your responsibility. You have to keep your peacekeepers in line. And of course, there were many civilian humanitarians involved in this too. It went across the board. So first of all, I knew I had to do better. Secondly, I knew that I needed help. I needed experts to come out and help me. Thirdly, I recognized that at that point, the United Nations really didn't even have a policy on PSEA, which was me the most revealing of all. And then we had to have a plan, and we had to institute immediately some orientation sessions and some training programs. We put all of that in place. I recommended strongly that every person getting on a plane to come to the DRC to join the mission be given orientation, what PSEA is all about, why it's important, and why one incident would mean you're going home.
So you've taken some commendable actions and you've learned a lot in terms of how to deal with this problem. Why is it so important for humanitarian organisations to take it seriously, to combat sexual exploitation and abuse by humanitarian workers?
First of all, it is a collective failure of the United Nations system when this happens. It damages the individuals who are violated. It damages their families. It makes it difficult for them to go back into the community, so there's communal damage for everybody. And as a system, it means that the UN has lost credibility. It means we cannot finish our mandate. We have lost the trust of the people, and our mission is then called into question. So it's extremely serious, and it's important, therefore, that every agency head at the very top take this seriously and pass the message down to the newest recruit that this is not tolerable.
So it's a very serious issue. It's come up on a number of occasions for humanitarians. We've seen it in Sierra Leone and Bosnia, in a variety of areas, even in your own experience with the DRC. What's different about the efforts that are happening at the moment that you're spearheading, that you're taking forward? How is this going to make a difference in a way that other efforts haven't previously?
Look, I don't think we've done nearly enough. We've done some things that have been helpful. I think we've begun to add a bit of structure to the program. We've gone through a series of appointments of senior focal points who have access to the agency head, who can report back regularly. Everybody has come up, for 25 agencies have come up with an action plan. We have also come up with minimum operating standards, MOS, that we review the action plans and the minimum operating standards twice a year on a video teleconference that we have with everyone. I'll be doing another one in September in New York during the General Assembly. But even with all of that, there still will be slippage. We are not doing well in terms of pre-departure orientation, post-arrival training. We're doing very poorly in the area of re-recruitment. People who are violated are being re-recruited by another agency. So we have to do better in all those areas. It's a long way to go.
So you've outlined a few areas where improvements can be made and some of those steps. For the humanitarian coordinators and the heads of UN agencies and NGOs in the field, if you were going to set out the various practical steps that they can put in place to address sexual exploitation and abuse, what would those steps be?
Well, it's interesting that you raised that question, because in just a few months ago, for the first time, the humanitarian coordinators were briefed on the issue of PSEA. Both I and the special coordinator of the Secretary General, Jane Hall-Lute, we went to the meeting and briefed them from our perspective on this. And for the first time now, humanitarian coordinators will have in their humanitarian compact an item that says you are responsible for preventing sexual exploitation and abuse and for protecting the victims of that. So this is a major step forward, and I think it can make a real difference. So I'm pleased with that.
It's excellent to have these steps forward, and it's also excellent to have the Secretary General so engaged on this issue. But what do you see at the field level as being the biggest obstacle to really making a difference?
It's like Martin Luther King used to say, you can't make them love us, but you can stop them from killing us. We've got to have a major behavioral change within the system where everybody recognizes that they have a responsibility in this area. Now, part of the problem is economic. We go to these countries, we have enormous economic advantages, we earn a good salary, we have other benefits, and we're dealing with people often who have virtually nothing. So it's not easy to make a deal to get sex on the side, on the cheap, and I'm being very crass about that. That is what I mean by a behavioral change. That has to change.
That power dynamic is huge. I mean, any of us who have worked in the field, we see the immense power that you have as a humanitarian worker. But also you brought up the issue of accountability. How can accountability be dealt better with by humanitarian organisations? Can there really be accountability for these issues?
You know, I was in the Philippines about 48 hours after the Haiyan typhoon struck, and I was in Haiti right after the earthquake, where I'd served for 5 years. So, but in both places, I saw hundreds of women standing in the hot sun. They had lost everything. They were totally vulnerable to anybody who wanted to come along and pick them up. I saw the same thing in Haiti, and I saw children being molested and otherwise maltreated, all because they were vulnerable. So the first thing that has to happen is somewhere in the Humanitarian Compact or in our terms of reference, somewhere very near the top of the list has to say, be on the lookout for sexual exploitation and abuse and harassment. That has to be there. There has to be a regular reporting requirement. And I think all of that is in the new humanitarian arrangements. All that has to be done. And then the agency heads have to make sure that there is ongoing training, because new people arrive and they need to be reorientated on this whole question. Otherwise, it's going to happen again.
So we have these new guidelines that have been developed in terms of how to combat this issue, and from humanitarian workers. You referred to the Humanitarian Coordinators Compact, which is their annual compact. But I also want to go back to a point that you raised before, this problem of violators sometimes being re-employed by different organisations. This is a concern, and it's a tragedy, particularly for the population. What do you think can be done to really combat this issue of these violators being re-employed?
No, you're entirely right. This is a big issue. I had one person from our mission who was dismissed summarily for having committed a SEA violation. And I discovered a year or so later that this person had been picked up by another agency. Now, in 2013, There was a group that was assembled. It was led by UNDP, and I give them great credit for that. They came up with a series of recommendations and actions to be taken. I think we need to go back to that report, see what was in it, and see how much those recommendations are being implemented. Otherwise, this will happen. And I can't believe that in the digital age, we cannot come up with a system where UN agencies and NGOs, their personnel data cannot be coordinated in a fashion that a red flag would go up if a violator came in asking for a job with another agency. I think that can still be made much better than it is. Right now it's not working very well, quite frankly.
So one of the things also is the role of the media. Now, when it comes to the sexual exploitation and abuse by humanitarian workers, there's a lot of concern often that in terms of the role that the media can play. What is your viewpoint in terms of the role of the media with an issue like this?
Well, you'll probably be surprised by what I'm going to say in response, because I think one of the things I learned from my very difficult experience in the Congo in 2005, I think it was that you cannot not deal with the media. You have to deal with them. And I would say we should change our mindset and see the media as an ally on PSEA. If you have a violation, I would go immediately to the media, say, look, this has happened. Here's what we did to try to prevent it. It obviously didn't work. And here are the remedial measures we're going to take to fix it. That way you've created an ally. The person doesn't have to discover it and then come out on top of you saying, why did you do this? But be up front with them and make them part of the process, because it's going to come out anyway.
Where can humanitarian workers or those who have been exposed to sexual exploitation and abuse, where can they go for help? Where would you recommend that they can find the help that they need?
Well, there are now within the UN family a number of websites. Obviously I can't quote them off the top of my head, but there's a good deal of information available there. We will shortly, and very shortly, be publishing a very voluminous, detailed best practice guide that deals with things such as the need for a community-based complaints mechanism, CBCM. We've done some pilot projects in the DRC and Ethiopia. We had 281 complaints as a result of that, 43 of these against humanitarian workers. So there are ways in which one can get information and support on this. I will try to get those websites, or maybe we could get them after this program.
I'd just like to go back to one point. In terms of this new guideline that will soon be published, can you outline for those who are watching today what exactly is entailed and what's included in that new guidance?
Well, it gives the experience of our pilot projects, how you make a community-based complaints mechanism work. Because part of the problem is when people are violated, they don't know where to go. They're ashamed, they're afraid, to whom can they turn? And so a lot of violations they're like a tree falling in the forest. They're never heard. But we now, with this community-based complaints mechanism, you have a regular system whereby your complaint can be heard, and you can be then made partially compensated, although you can never be made totally whole. The other aspect is we have to do a better job of giving feedback to the individual who's been violated and to the community. What happened to the violator? Was the violator punished, or did they get off scot-free for something that was really egregious? I think that's all part of it.
And finally, Ambassador Swing, for the people who are the survivors of sexual exploitation and abuse, what can we do to support them after an incident? What is it that the humanitarian community can do more?
I think the short answer is we need to do a lot more. I've never been fully satisfied that we have seriously addressed the question of compensation for people who've been violated. I'm not necessarily talking about monetary compensation. I'm talking about some form of assistance that will give people a sense that justice is being done, that their grievance has been heard, and that there's an effort being made to make them whole again. Perhaps it's training for another career. Perhaps it is psychosocial support, which a lot of them will need, or other measures. I'm not talking monetary necessarily, because that could perhaps get out of hand, but even that should be considered. And I think that we have to have a much closer look at how do we compensate people in a sense of trying to give them a sense that they're being made whole again and justice is being done.
Ambassador Swing, it's been a privilege. We've learned a lot. Thank you for sharing your experience and speaking so openly. I think as leaders who are listening, they will learn so much from this. Thank you very much. For any of you who would like to find out more information or seek help, please see the email on your screen now. It is the Interagency Standing Committee PSEA Task Team email. And for those who are looking at setting up a collective complaints mechanism in field locations, there is now a new guide that you can look at. Here it is. You can find the link on our webpage, deliveraidbetter.org. Thanks again, and bye for now.